Beneath the deep night sky of Earth, millions of people looked up and asked a question that had existed for thousands of years. Could humans ever reach the moon? For centuries, the moon had been nothing more than a distant light.
If you look at the schematics here, the LOX feed lines require insulation right up to the disconnect.
And the flag alignment seems correct based on the rollout orientation.
A symbol of mystery and dream.
But by the late 1960s, that dream was no longer just imagination. It had become a real mission, led by NASA, with the goal of carrying humans to another world.
The telemetry data is spiking right here.
That aligns with the projected atmospheric entry point. We need a decision on the reroute.
Dawn on July 16, 1969, arrived in tense silence at the Kennedy Space Center. In the thin morning mist and pale golden light, a gigantic machine stood tall on the launch pad. Inside that spacecraft were three men carrying the hopes of all humanity.
Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins.
They were not just astronauts. They were pioneers, preparing to enter a realm never before explored. As the countdown began, the atmosphere became so tense it felt as if the entire world's heartbeat could be heard.
10, 9,
8. The engines began to tremble.
7,
6. A blinding light erupted beneath
Systems
the rocket.
nominal. Gantry
5,
clear. We
4,
have to go for launch.
the ground shook.
3,
2,
1. And then, with a thunderous roar, the spacecraft lifted away from Earth. A massive flame pushed it upward, piercing through the atmosphere, carrying three humans away from their home. In the first few minutes, acceleration pressed them tightly into their seats.
The Earth below slowly grew smaller. The blue sky faded into the deep black of space.
When the final engine shut down, absolute silence surrounded them. They had escaped Earth's gravity. They were floating in space. Ahead of them lay a journey of hundreds of thousands of kilometers. 4 hours, the spacecraft drifted silently through the endless void. There was no sound, no wind.
Only complete stillness.
Through the window, Earth appeared as a small blue sphere, fragile and alone in the vast universe. It was the moment humanity truly realized how small its home really was. After several days of travel, the moon began to appear more clearly. It was no longer a distant point of light, but a real world, with mountains, craters, and ancient plains. The spacecraft entered orbit around the moon, flying above its cold, gray surface. This was when the most dangerous phase of the mission began. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin entered the lunar module, preparing to separate from the main spacecraft. Michael Collins remained behind, alone in orbit, waiting for his crewmates to return. As the module separated, the two astronauts began their descent. Below them was a land untouched by human footsteps. The onboard computer guided their descent, but suddenly, warning alarms appeared. The computer was overloaded. Fuel was running low. Time was measured in seconds. Neil Armstrong looked out the window and realized they were heading toward a field of rocks. If they landed there, they could tip over and die. He made a decision. He took manual control. The spacecraft hovered above the surface, moving slowly, searching for a safe place. Fuel remained for only a few more seconds. Finally, he found a flat area. The spacecraft touched down. Dust rose into the air, then slowly settled.
Silence.
Neil Armstrong spoke the words the world had been waiting to hear. They had landed safely. But the mission was not yet complete. Hours later, Neil Armstrong opened the hatch and began climbing down the ladder. Below him was the surface of another world. No wind, no life, only silence that had lasted for billions of years. Hours later, Neil Armstrong opened the hatch and began climbing down the ladder. Below him was the surface of another world. No wind, no life, only silence that had lasted for billions of years.
Look at the size of that formation.
Copy that. Proceeding with caution. Surface looks unstable.
He stepped down. At that moment, for the first time in history, a human stood on another world. Buzz Aldrin soon followed. The two men began to move, their steps slow in the low gravity. Each step was light, almost like flying. They looked around, observing a world never touched before. They planted the flag. They collected rocks. They took photographs. They conducted experiments. But above all, they looked up at the sky. There they saw Earth, a small blue sphere, suspended in darkness. That was their home. After more than 2 hours, it was time to leave. They returned to the lunar module and prepared for liftoff. The engine ignited, and the upper portion of the module rose from the surface, leaving the landing legs behind. They ascended, leaving the moon and returning to orbit. Michael Collins was waiting. The three men were reunited, but the journey was not over. They had to return to Earth. The spacecraft began its journey home, leaving lunar orbit and crossing the deep darkness of space once again. For days, they drifted through the void. Carrying with them rock samples and memories no one else in human history had ever experienced. At last, Earth began to grow larger before them. The spacecraft plunged into the atmosphere at tremendous speed. Friction created a blazing fireball around them. The temperature outside was hot enough to melt metal. But the protective shield kept them safe. Then the parachutes opened. The spacecraft fell into the ocean. They were home. The three men were
I've
lifted
got
from
you.
the sea,
We're heading
not
for the
just as
airlock now.
astronauts,
Stay
but
with
as
me.
individuals who had changed history forever.
Welcome to the Odyssey, Commander. We're running diagnostics now.
They had proven that humanity was not limited to its own world. They had proven that what was once considered impossible could become reality. That moment was not only a victory for science. It was a victory for imagination. It was the moment humanity first stepped beyond its world and touched the universe. And when Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins looked back at Earth from space, they did not just see a planet. They saw the entire history of humanity. And they knew this was only the beginning. One day, humans would return to the moon. One day, humans would go even farther, Mars or other worlds. And beyond into the stars. Because on that day in 1969, when humans stepped onto the moon, the future had begun.